we're live.
It happened.
It happened. It worked. Thank you, Jonny. You're the best.
Yes.
Good morning, GitOpsians, or afternoon, or whatever. It's morning for me. That's the anchor for time zones as far as this show is concerned, because I can't remember time zones to save my life. Which is ironic because I work on a globally distributed team where time zones are really critically important, and I am constantly, what time is it in every day?
Yes. Let me please not wake somebody up in the middle of the night and ask a silly question because I'm not aware.
Yeah, no, exactly. Or I was scheduling a meeting the other day with one of my colleagues in Australia, and I was using my phone, and I keep my phone in military time, and I accidentally tapped the 5 instead of the 17. And I thought I tapped the 17. I totally, just fat finger issue. And so he looks at it, he goes, "You scheduled this for like 3 a.m. my time." And I was like, "What? No."
Oh, dang it.
Yeah, it was whatever time zone it was a bad time for both of us. It was like 3 a.m. his time and like 5 a.m. my time, and neither of us wanted to do that. I was like, "I'm so sorry, let me fix this." So Anyway, we had our meeting, it was fine. But yeah, time zones are terrible. So that's why it's always morning on GitOps Guide for the Galaxy, unless we do a specially adjusted time zone, and then it's whatever it's time for me. It's whatever my time is. Anyway, but speaking of time zones, you shifted time zones last week for Kubecon in Salt Lake.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like there were, I was reading something that it said that they had like, I think 9,000 people, 9 or 10,000 people at
over
the event.
9,000. It was like 9,400. I just got that number today from a friend of mine, and he said it was 9,200 actually.
Yeah, that's
huge.
Ton of people, and yeah, it was awesome. It was just like last year was huge. Like in Chicago, like the whole venue was giant. Like everything everywhere you went, like all the displays and everything were huge. I think this year it was still scaled out pretty big, but some of the store, like the CNCF store, was like a little bit smaller. It's more like a corner store kind of thing. So it didn't feel as like this big giant venue, and like you had to go to all these different buildings. And remember, we had to go like up and down different floors and like go around and freaking secret knocks and stuff like that to find rooms. Like it wasn't really like that here. Everything was kind of in a one general location, just kind of sprawling around. And they did have like an attached hotel that you could go and do some stuff at, some of the other sessions. But it was good.
Yeah, I noticed that the hotel address and the venue address for some folks were the same. So I know you went and picked up a signed copy of the book from the Dynatrace hosted event. So I shipped my signature over for that, since I couldn't be there in person. I was a little busy with my child's birthday. So I shipped labels and I signed 400 something labels and shipped them off. And I was trying to get like, what's your hotel room at the hotel? And he's like, "Oh, well, it's this number." He said, "But the whole conference is at this hotel, so you can also just like address it to like the Dynatrace booth." In the end, I just addressed it to the concierge and had him go pick it up from the front desk. I was like, I'm out. I'm done. That's too hard.
It's getting complicated.
It's getting rough over here, and I'm not doing this. But it worked. They got my signature packet and lovingly applied it for me, which was very nice of them to do, so that I could virtually participate.
Yeah, they were awesome about it. Like they had, I mean, when they opened it up, especially for the book signing, like I think I sent you the picture of it. This is a decent line, right? And I took a picture after I'd been standing in line for a couple of minutes. So like they'd already probably mowed through like 10 or 15 people by the time, like I took that picture finally. So like, yeah, it was a pretty popular little area at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was exciting. Several people sent me pictures from the the banner and everything like that. I'm like, "Hey, did you know about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did know about that. Thank you for sharing." But so the one thing, like, I hadn't got, I think I heard about one talk that maybe I think it was given this past KubeCon. I don't know if you saw this. It was like cryptography and like quantum computing. Maybe
I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so apparently that's a recording to keep an eye out for. Everybody, I've heard, not everybody, a few people I've talked to have been like, "Oh, I didn't get to go to this talk, but I really wish I had. I'm waiting for that recording." What talks did you get to go to?
So I went to a few different ones. I was kind of all over the place, but Gerald and I went to I think it was Solo, where they were showing how they hacked Argo CD, right? So like
Oh, nice.
and so what they did is they went in and they found that like the Redis cache was open, and the Redis cache pod was like wide open, and so they went in and they showed how like, hey, what is this GitOps thing? They went through the whole story. Like they tried to get submitted for a talk last year, they didn't. So then they went through all the talks to figure out like, okay, well, what was the theme and like basically like why did we miss, right? And then they're like, man, there's a lot of people talking about GitOps. Like, what's GitOps? Like, what's Argo? And so then they started digging in, and then they're like, oh, this thing uses Redis. Redis is wide open. What happens if I do that? And yeah, so they just walked through the whole thing, and they showed how they hit it and how they attacked it, and then how they did like the disclosure back to Argo, the Argo CD project, and into it.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was really really well done. Like the two guys that did it, I can't remember their names, but the way that they traded off and the way that they presented it, it was well done. And then another one, I went to another security one, and it was Solo, or I'm sorry, it was Wiz. And what they did is they ended up attacking the service mesh.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, so they went after Linkerd, and then they went after Istio, and basically the gist is like they found some IP tables rules that said, hey, run if you're this UID, allow it, you're good to go. And so then they're like, well, I wonder what happens if I change my container port to run as that UID. And so then they did it, and they had all these elevated privileges and stuff like that. So it was, and then they just had access to everything. So, and then they did another disclosure back to those projects and got it fixed. But it was really interesting because like they show it like, it's not like they were some super technical geniuses or anything like that. They're like, oh, I just found this. They're like, I wonder, how do I go from here to here? You know, without as a privileged user or as a privileged container, how do I do this? And yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, that's fun. I want to find those recordings when that's a, so I feel like something is like faintly pinging in my memory about container IDs and privileges, and something we did in the managed OpenShift space a while ago. And I am just not. This was a couple years ago, even that I'm thinking like I'm just not coming up with it. I feel like there's something.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something. I don't know. That's gonna bug
Yeah,
me.
with the Istio thing, like when they did their disclosure, like so a lot of that stuff got rolled out and fixed. And I think like OpenShift, not to be like a Red Hat OpenShift, you know, snob or anything like that, but I think that there's a lot of things that OpenShift does out of the box that kind of stops that, where
Yeah.
upstream stuff like it's not really the thing. But with the Argo part, you know, like Gerald made a good point where when we deploy Argo CD OpenShift GitOps, right, it has a default permission of like cluster admin. You know what I mean? So like
Mm-hmm.
that's out of the box, right? You're not assigning that. That's already assigned. You actually have to remove that if you don't want that to be there. And so he was like, man, does it make sense to maybe we should start small and add on versus start
Yeah.
big and take
Yeah.
off. So
And actually, we did that in the managed services, like the layered products. So, like for example, like well, I don't know about like Red Hat AI, but this should be the case. But in the layered products that used to come with SRE support, on top of OpenShift, so like things like Roam, RHMI is like a really really far back one. We actually had this as part of the checklist, the SRE checklist for onboarding, is that your workloads could not use higher than dedicated admin. So cluster admin was absolutely not. And if you needed, like, what did you need? And we forced folks to create custom roles so that it only did the thing it needed and not the thing it didn't.
yeah.
So dedicated admin could be allowed. That's a, is it? I think that's an OpenShift construct, not just a managed OpenShift construct, I think.
Dedicated admin. So you have admin, which is like admin over the namespace or project, and then you have cluster admin, which is obviously cluster.
No, so this may be a managed OpenShift construct. I can't remember. We do additional RBAC stuff to make things safer.
Yeah, I'm
anyway,
sure they get blurry.
Yeah, there's no stars in our RBAC, right? So we did this. So yeah, we would force the dedicated admin be like the highest level you're allowed to use, not cluster admin for anything. Nothing gets to run as cluster admin. If it was something that we're like would be operated by with an SRE team behind it, because we were like, nope, that's not safe. That's not allowed. But the things that are just coming from the operator hub, even when they're Red Hat things, they don't go through the same community of practice. Like life cycling that was through. There was actually like a checklist that we had as like, what are your permissions levels? You're doing that? No, you can't do that. You need to go and create a new role, or create a way for your workloads to temporarily elevate and then go back down only when they absolutely have to. I forget all of the mechanisms for doing that. It's one of those things, like, it's a really cool thing that I remember we can do, but I don't remember how it works because I haven't had to touch it in so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear OpenShift GitOps is running as cluster admin, but I am disappointed. And I think actually when we had Marty on a while ago, I was talking to him about this actually, about like the expectations for running on a managed service, and like, not like, no, you don't use cluster admin ever if you don't have to. Least privilege always. So, and that's, that's not a new principle, but it is one that it's, when you think about the scale of it, it's just, it has to be done at every single layer of your stack. So that's fun though. I like the hacking ones. Were there any other interesting talks? I mean, there were lots of interesting talks, and they're always all scheduled at the same time, right? That's the thing. Yeah. Every year, it's like I'll find 5 or 6 things I want to go to, and be like, ooh, and they're all at the same time.
It's kind of a bummer because a lot of the really good ones are at the same time. Like and I tried to catch the ones that like were only going through once. I tried to just run and get those. Like, so the first day I didn't go to anything because I was doing ArgoCon the whole day.
Yeah.
I take that back. I did ArgoCon half the day, and then I went and did OpenShift Commons the other half. So I did watch like the Veeam cast and validated patterns talk, which was awesome. Matt Bader from Veeam did like just excellent job presenting. Like he's got like this his aura about him, and he's just energetic and like just passionate and stuff like that. It was really well done. And then on Tuesday or Wednesday, I did some booth stuff over at the sticker wall for a little bit, and then I did go see like a backstage one. So they're talking about some of the plugins and stuff like that they're working on, and how they've redone some of the back end services, so it's not as complicated as it used to be. So I don't know if you remember, like they have like the scaffolder, which they still have, and then they have like 2 or 3 other like core pieces. And it used to be like if you made a change to like a plugin, you used to have to like reload the whole thing or rebuild the thing and then reserve it and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of that stuff's gotten a lot easier. It's a lot easier to anchor services together now versus like back in the day where it was kind of it was a non-trivial task to link objects together within Backstage to give it that like hierarchy or heritage or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I like to see things like that improving. There's so many. Such an interesting the open source, like the feedback loop. The way things move through that. I was actually just talking about this, like for one of the recent Kubernetes releases, like very recent ones, changed admission controllers, so you don't need to have a server anymore for admission controllers. You can just have an admission controller, which is a huge improvement, right? That's a huge improvement. I think you still need the server running if you're getting like a certain level of complexity, but some of like the base cases now don't need it. And I'm just like, yes, like this is the way. Like bake things into like the platform. Just have it as like a streamlined experience. It's so cool. How much this is all changing. So I know when we went to Kubecon together last year in Chicago, we went to a crossplane like introduction talk. Did you catch any additional, like, was there any additional crossplane talks or like next level things you managed to catch?
No, I didn't see it. Like there wasn't at least on Wednesday, I don't remember seeing anything because I was looking specifically for crossplane and some infrastructure things. But I basically just kind of followed the service mesh trail. I went to a couple of solo talks because they released some stuff on ambient mesh, And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And so I just went and kind of listened to what they were doing with the ambient mesh and stuff like that, especially since Istio, Red Hat Service Mesh just started supporting Istio 3, which is using Sail, which eventually is going to support ambient mesh.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, I'll just go kind of check it out and see what they're doing. And they've got like this Omni mesh. I don't know. They just have all kinds of crazy stuff. So, but I followed a bunch of the networking tracks just because there were so many of them. Like there was a bunch of networking, like security tracks or some Argo CD or some GitOps tracks and stuff like that that I went and followed. And then like that backstage one was just like, it happened to be one in between many. And I was like, oh shit, okay, oh shoot, okay, I'll go check this out. And so yeah, I jumped over and went and checked out for a little bit.
I like that we're pretending we're professionals who don't swear.
I try, man. I try so hard not to.
Oh, it's a good thing they don't supervise us that closely. We also do mark that this is not appropriate for children, and just to be safe, because we know we're engineers in our Google Google YouTube algorithm settings. I always make sure to do that. I'm like, we say bad words sometimes. We're engineers. This happens. Make sure to click this. Technically, it's just nerdy technology shit, and there shouldn't be anything bad here. But our language is PG-13.
Yeah, I try. I do try, but sometimes you get too comfortable. So
yeah. Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned that there was just a lot of networking tracks, and I'm just like, that's always my worst subject is networking. I feel like I'm so bad at it, and it's really ironic because I used to do so much work that was relevant to that space with IoT and servers and like networks and virtual networks and like, you know, things that were like distributed across buildings and everything. And we had to do all the security audit stuff on it. I was so good at networking for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I know nothing about networking. I don't know. It's black magic over there. There's maybe something about protocols. I don't know. Stuff.
Well, it's I feel like when I grew up learning networking, it was very OSI, right? Layer 3, you do your thing, and like I didn't really care about anything else, right? I'd get up to layer 3 and then, okay, cool, it's working, ping, whatever, not ping, but you know, like, all right, cool, I got routes. I'm not using VLANs anymore. Cool.
Yeah.
And then when you move into cloud or you move into like OpenStack or OpenShift, it's like, okay, now we're talking about software defined networking. Cool, got it. And now we're talking about like eBPF and all like service mesh and like all kinds of crazy crap that you can do. And it's just the brains behind these things are like incredible. How did you even think of that? You know what I mean? Like it's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where every time I go to a networking talk, I'm impressed. And I'm always just like, I think this is the importance about specialization. This is why it's good to have specialization. Is if you ask somebody to be a full stack engineer, which I always say is a trap, right? Full stack engineer is a trap. It's asking you to wear like 5 hats. That's asking you to do 5 jobs. There's always going to be a limitation to what you can be good at. And so having these people who are just like, okay, my job is software defined networking. That is my whole job. It's my whole world. It's my whole space. That specialization allows for some really neat innovation because these are the people who understand what the problems are, what the need is, and they're allowed to iterate on it. And so, yeah, I don't know. Software defined networking is such a cool thing. We should probably do an episode just on it sometime. Get somebody who knows things to give a primer on it. Because every time I feel like I understand Kubernetes networking, I find some place where I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah. And like now with, I think eBPF kind of, it's like the new mic drop for some of the networking stuff, especially networking security. And it's like, I don't even know. I wouldn't even know how to explain it, like what it does, but it does, you know, it's just going from like, it's beyond just connecting clusters and connecting applications, right? It does so much more. And so it's having somebody come on and just drop explain it to me like I'm 5 would be awesome.
Yeah, and the thing about eBPF is we say it's new. It's actually not new.
It's not new. Yeah, it's been around.
It's not new, but it's new to Kubernetes. I think is really the differentiator there. Yeah, do an episode on. Okay, we'll do it. We're just talking in the pre-show about what is our like what is our schedule coming up for this next like we're gonna have one in December, and then January we're gonna go back to every other week as per usual. So like this episode, there's one in December. We were kind of tentatively thinking cross-playing because I realized that we both like cross-playing and we've never done an episode on it for some reason. So we can find software-defined networking for the new year. It's going to pivot to this question in the chat, which is just sort of a general question. Migrating from Jenkins to Tecton pipelines or / Argo CD. I don't know. Johnny, do you have thoughts here?
Yeah, one piece at a time, I guess. Like, you know, because it's completely different. You know, like you're going from Groovy to YAML, and just the way that the tasks and everything are broken up.
Yeah, it's not. It is a big migration because you're not looking at the same thing. I was thinking kind of that as well. I do think you're out, you know, aligned to outcomes is really the best thing here. So you know, Tecton is pipelines, right? And it's going to be it's pipelines and you just kind of have to think about Jenkins. Kind of, you could trick Jenkins into doing pipeline like stuff, but it was really more about deployments. At least when last time I was in Jenkins directly hands-on, which was quite some time ago. So I think that it's, and you eat an elephant one bite at a time. But think about what you want your outcomes to be. And so just think about like, what is like the minimum viable thing that I need my new stack to do? What is my first use case or my first golden path, whatever user story, critical user journey, whatever project management tool you want to apply to this planning, start there. Yeah. And just get that initial basic outcome achieved. And then work on step 2. So if that first basic outcome is I'm going to have my UI binary built in Tecton, that's your first outcome. Now your second outcome may be and then continuously released or deployed with Argo CD. That's a second outcome, right? Argo CD is just you get a manifest and you deploy that, right? So you have to first build the binaries and generate the manifest, and that's what Tecton is about. So step 1, and I don't know your tech stack at all, so I'm just assuming there's a UI, but like that could be a faulty assumption. You may only have a CLI binary, and that's also okay. But the point is like you get that binary and you're gonna get that built and then a manifest created, and then that manifest exists in Git, and that is the outcome. Like that's outcome 1. And then outcome 2 is then something applies that new manifest to an environment on a continuous basis, in this case, Argo CD. That's outcome 2. And so start off with just being able to do that in like a dev environment or an integration environment of some kind. You can even do it locally as well with Kind. That's where I do all of my proofs of concept, is just on my computer with Kind, but my computer is a beast. I'm not going to lie. It's actually not even that much of a. I was actually just looking at computers now because like my computer's a few years old. It doesn't fail to do anything I needed to do. But anyhow, so align to outcomes, project manage this thing, apply the same discipline to rebuilding your infrastructure stuff as you would a user-facing application. And attack it in that way. So what's the minimum viable thing? What's the most important thing that we need to do? Start there, and then start working out through your kind of other, you know, capillary things.
Yeah. One thing you said there that I really like is like, what are you deploying? All right, cool. Whatever gets deployed, so that's the second. Whatever, that's the final stage, right? That's an Argo CD evolution. Everything else is going to be over in your Tecton side. And just remember, like, Argo monitors Git to make sure that your cluster is reconciled with what you have in Git. You can set up GitHub actions, or not GitHub actions, but GitHub event listeners and stuff like that within Tecton that will do like pipelines as code. So if you make a change in your pipeline on your repo, Tecton will pick it up and then start running through the pipeline, or it'll execute the pipeline run on your cluster and then start that whole workflow. So just know that there's 2 ingresses, 2 entry points into potentially doing the same thing. So make sure you're just not, you know, doubling up your duty.
Yeah, the tools are really good, like in their space. Don't try to make the tool work outside of its like best application. It should work the same for GitLab as it does for GitHub. You could even have a privately hosted Git thing, and it should work the same. It's just instead of a proper integration, I think you need to look at a webhook. I don't remember exactly the like off the top of my head implementation, but it should be almost identical.
Yeah, GitHub does like an application, and I think you're right. GitLab's a hook.
Yeah. I think it's roughly the same though. So from whether or not you're in GitLab versus GitHub versus self-hosted Git, even doesn't have to be Git. It could even still be, what's the other one we still use here at Red Hat? For RHEL? I forget. We still use
You're not talking about like Bitbucket, right?
Perforce. I think it's Perforce is the one we still use.
Oh, dang. Okay, I had no idea.
Anyway, you can do it. Doesn't matter. You can do it with any source of truth for code, but of course Git is easier. Is my point. It's just going to be the mechanisms are going to be different. You're going to be using webhooks or versus like built-in integrations to the stuff, but it all works.
Yeah. And take a look at the cluster tasks too. The cluster tasks I think are being deprecated eventually, but like take a look at the built-in tasks and cluster tasks, because instead of reinventing the wheel, a lot of that stuff is already provided to you. Like the Git like pulling and cloning and all that stuff. Like all the stuff is there. You just have to plug in the parameters.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, hopefully that helps you out. And then if you're not already on the CNCF Slack for these projects, like that's probably a good place to get some help with your adoption as well. Like if you're just using the upstream, if you are a Red Hat customer, and I think Red Hat support can help with these things too. Or, I don't know how any of that works. I'm just an engineer. I don't sell anybody anything, so I've got no clue what we do after the software is built.
Yeah, if you're using OpenShift pipelines, it's definitely
there's somebody.
Solvable. Yeah,
there's somebody. But yeah, so in terms of this question about IBM buys Red Hat, I don't know what your question is, but Red Hat's an independent subsidiary, and I'll refer you to any of our public-facing anything for everything. I don't know. Not an attorney, not a corporate executive, just an engineer. I have no insights. They tell me nothing.
And that's what I was going to reply back to. It's like I'm below the weeds, so I'm not even in the atmosphere where people that care about it actually see it.
No,
I don't even see it.
Idea.
Yeah, it's
no
it's
idea.
Just a thing.
I got no concepts of any of that. I just work here.
Yeah, I got asked that probably. I probably got asked that more than anything else during that conference. The question about IBM, like I really don't even. I have no idea.
Yeah, people ask me about that all the time. Like, oh, what's Red Hat like now that IBM bought it? We're still Red Hat as far as I can tell. It literally doesn't impact my life day to day.
Yeah, no idea.
No idea. Yeah. I'm sure there's something somewhere, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. We're too far down. The people that see it they're still stepping on us. So
yeah, exactly. So I got nothing. I got no idea. Just an engineer, my friend. Just an engineer.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else from Kubecon?
So there was a big announcement on Thursday, I think. So Karina, you know Karina Angel, right?
Of course.
She honestly just out doing the Lord's work, herding cats, trying to get everybody together and making sure that stuff is presentable. And they Red Hat, the Royal donated Podman Desktop, and Boot Seed, so bootable container, to CNCF as I think it's an incubating project now. So it's a pretty big commitment from Red Hat back to the community. Bootable containers, if you haven't checked them out, like it's a unique feature because you basically spin up a container that's got a kernel, it's got like systemd integration and stuff like that. And so when you start thinking about like edge devices and provisioning and stuff like that, like it really does help streamline some of that like infrastructure automation, and kind of gives you that same workflow. So now you can build an operating system through like a Docker file and then deploy it that way. So it's pretty neat.
We use Podman very heavily in the managed OpenShift, like at least on Azure Red Hat OpenShift, we use Podman a lot. It's very heavily, it's a big part of our development tool chain. So we use it, and it's all open source stuff, so I can say that. But it also shouldn't be shocking that we use this internally and then tell people if we have problems. That's one thing Red Hat's pretty good at, is drinking our own champagne. So it's getting trialed and tested really significantly internally. So that should help it be more usable asset for the community. Is like we use it a lot every day.
So does our team. Like I think that Podman itself is like super stable. Like I mean, as far as tools go, like it's been one of those ones where it's like, okay, this is awesome. On the Mac, I think like when it first released with like Podman Machine, that's where it was a little flaky.
Yeah.
But it's much better now. Like that whole integration 2 years ago, it would just get under your skin because like there's some time sync issues and stuff like that. And when that happened, then the machine would basically just go bananas, and then you'd have to reset the whole thing. It was just kind of annoying. But it seems like all that stuff has worked out. The one thing I'd never really messed with until we started talking about this demo was Podman Desktop.
Oh,
and, if you're a GUI person, like it's
pretty slick.
It's actually kind of cool. Yeah, it's pretty. It's functional. You can go through. You can enable plugins. It's all. I'm just not a GUI person. It's much easier for me to navigate via the command line. So.
It's I actually am the same. It took me some convincing to actually use the GUI for either Podman or Docker. I forget why I ended up using the GUI. I was having issues with rootless, and I ended up just installing the desktop app just to see if it would help me figure out what was going on, because I wasn't getting anywhere with it. It didn't help, by the way. I ended up going to do the thing that I always end up doing, is I go and I check GitHub issues to see if there's an open issue against it, and there was. So it was okay, I gotta go make sure I'm on this specific version with this in this series of dependencies in order to actually resolve that issue. But yeah, that was ended up being what it was. I just kind of like did the GUI as like a Hail Mary pass to see if it would make my life better before I searched the internet. It didn't, but that's because of the bug. So that's really what I was trying to make sure of. I was like, please don't let there be a bug. Please don't let there be a bug. Like, please let this be a me issue, because I don't want to to put a bug against this. And then fortunately, I was like, all right, I may have to go open a bug against this. There's an issue. Let me go see if there's already a bug against it. There was, thankfully. So I didn't have to do anything. Hillary wins by
thumbs up it.
Me too. But they had fixed the bug. It was in Podman like 5. There was an issue, and then I can't remember the exact issue number. And then like when I went to like Podman like 5.0.2 or whatever it was, like, yay, fixed, done. So I will say the other thing that the Podman team has been doing a really great job on is responding to their GitHub issues and actually providing insights or paths forwards if people are hitting things. So mad props to them, because that's a lot of work. And then you also have to do the development work.
Yeah. The Podman project is awesome. Like the docs are really well done. Dan Walsh is pretty cool.
Dan Walsh is a great guy.
There's just a bunch of like positive aura around it. You know what I mean? Like the vibe around Podman is pretty cool. Like Podman Desktop itself, like if you use it, it just kind of makes sense. Like you're not really like, oh man, what does this button do? It's really like, oh, okay, cool. You want to add a plugin? Check. You want to enable like a Kubernetes kind cluster? Cool, do it. Yeah, it's awesome. And being able to go from like, oh, let me spin up a pod, or let me create an image, right, to let me now make that image run as a container, and now let me run that container as a pod in Podman. Okay, now let me take that pod from Podman and run it in a Kubernetes kind cluster, all in the same interface. I was like, that's kind of dope. Like that's not bad, because that's a whole life cycle right there, right? Like it's like, okay, I've gone from development to deployment.
Yeah.
In multiple stages. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it does. It does make that quite convenient. And then we just have on our end, like in our stuff, we just have some like make files that go and do all the Podman stuff for us when we're doing local dev, and just like
we do
bloop, there's my pods, right? Everything's still, nothing has replaced the make file. Nothing has replaced it. It's still my favorite. That it still works just so well.
It's so we did a workshop once, right? And we were up in Virginia. It might have been Virginia or Frankfurt. I can't remember. But like somebody was like, Make is so old. Like, why are you guys using this? Like, why don't you use something like new? Like, I think they recommended like tasks. And I started looking at it, and I'm like, I just started using Make, and Make is easier to me than trying to do like multiple lines of YAML and stuff like that. Run commands across multiple lines. I don't know. Make that's gonna be hard to replace.
It's so. I mean, we have this Make file. It's massive. It's just a beast, right? But it's like, okay, I want to make this thing locally, and then it goes off and does all the Podman stuff. But then it's like, oh, I need to make a full OpenShift cluster in production. So then the same make file has a, hey, go make this, and it kicks off a bunch of Ansible. Yeah. We actually ended up moving that. That's getting put into one of our CI repos instead of the main dev repo, just because we can also integrate all that stuff into a CI/CD pipeline really nicely. Mm-hmm. Just bloop, there it goes, off it goes and does the stuff. But anyway, like, so we just have this make, and it's just like, I need to do this task, so I'm going to go to make the thing, and then it goes and it kicks off and so yeah, that might go kick off some stuff that then gets you some Podman things happening, or it might kick off some stuff that gets you some Ansible stuff happening, or it might kick off just another series of Bash scripts because Bash is still pretty great. Like, yeah. Whatever it is that we end up doing with it, at the end of the day, like, Make is just a really nice interface into anything.
And you can do anything, right? And I think that's probably the beauty of it. It's like, it's such a utilitarian thing where it's like, okay, I can do shell, I can do Ansible, because I use it for my Hypershift stuff. So, my hosted control plane stuff, where I'm like, hey, I want to spin up a new cluster, right? And so then I'll go and I'll either update my vars or I'll pass it as an argument. And I'm like, hey, make blah, 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 blah. And it just does its thing and make destroy and goes and tears it all down. Like, it's just easy.
Yeah. That was a thing that I did one time for a code test. And like, the code test itself was one thing, but honestly, probably the best part of that, what I turned in there, was my make file. Yeah. Hey, we're just gonna like do all this stuff. We're gonna go set up all these dependencies and make sure you have them, and start the virtual environment for Python, and like all of these other things, so that this all runs correctly. And like, this was a little bit pre-containers. There's no works on my machine differential between me and the person evaluating what I've submitted. I didn't get that job, but the code ran.
That's pretty funny. I was really expecting that to go a different direction. No. So like,
it's something that I just always do. If somebody asks me for a code thing or a code portfolio thing or whatever, unless it's like some leak code thing, which, I hate it, because I've had issues where things like on those web interface coding things, like, it all works locally for me, and then like it's not working on that, and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with your environment, but it hates me.
Why? What's different? Yeah.
Yeah, right? Why is this import not working? It's part of the standard library. Why is it not here? Happens every time. Yeah. And so, but yeah, it's if it's anything like that, where it's like a take-home test or whatever, like, I always have a make file that sets up the environment exactly as I'm expecting it, so that I don't have anybody need to do anything except check my README, run the make command I tell you to run.
That's 100% it right there, right? Like, especially 5 years removed Jonny, right, is much smarter than 5 years ago, 5 years previous Jonny, because like, we were on a project and we were trying to make like this awesome deployer for OpenShift, and like, oh my God, AWS GovCloud, right? We were trying to make this where it was like push button, and we're like, all right, we'll run this command. And so you ended up having like this string, or this page of strings that you had to run. And it's like, all right, had we been smart, we could have been like, make build, or like make sync or whatever, and it pulls down all the images, and then make tar, whatever you're doing, and then let that do the thing, and then that way your commands or your README is like, do this, here's why, do this, here's why. Yeah. If you see this, here's what you do, that kind of thing.
Oh, you can have your make file echo out stuff. So if things are working well, even if it's like got a really long set of things to do, you can have it echo out checkpoints. Like, hey, I'm doing this now. Things are good. And then if it fails, you can kind of like tell you what. And you can since you can have the tree structure in there, right? Where it's like this make does all of these other things. If it fails in this one spot and you can resolve that failure, you can restart it from that part now and off it goes. I don't know. Very few things have surpassed a make file in usability for me.
Yeah. That's like even looking at that thing like tasks, it's nice, it's pretty, the interface it's amazing, right? It's very good. It just doesn't seem as flexible as a make file, to be honest. Like there's just so much you can do with make, and I started using make 2 years ago, so it's like I literally am probably brand new to most people, like most people to this. So I'm like, it's kind of dope.
I don't even remember the first time, more than 10 years, for sure. Because that make file I was referencing initially is I made it for a job interview 10 years ago. And I wasn't new to make then. So I don't know.
Yeah.
13 years, 14 years maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I've used make build and stuff like that, but like actually creating a make file, I never really had to. Like it's just kind of there. It always just worked. So
I always did, because all of my like, I guess this is going back, right? All of like the we actually shoved it into Jenkins. So okay, right. We had these Jenkins build servers, right? This is where I met Christian Hernandez, like way back in the day, right? We had these Jenkins servers for building stuff. And you could like give it just like bash to do things, right? Basically. And so we would daisy chain these jobs. And so I would need it to run the automated testing for each build. And so, and I needed it to like do it against like the environment as soon as it was built. So I actually just had the test executed on the Jenkins server is where they ran from. And so it would I had a make file in there so that it would create and get all the dependencies and do everything to build the environment for the test automation to execute. So it would build and run the test automation from and it was doing it on the Jenkins server, and then it would store the output to a file somewhere that we could check later to make sure everything was good. But it also had, I don't even remember how we did this. It sent a signal. If certain things didn't work, it would fail out. That one was really tricky to do. I wish I could remember how we did it because it was really cool, but it's so long ago. I'm like, I can tell you what we did. If you give me time, I can probably recreate it, but I don't really remember how we did it.
Yeah, and my memory of it is probably better than what it actually was.
I think that's accurate. I do really think that is a thing that I have found to be true. In like, I remember the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
The outcomes were good, but when you go into the implementation, some of that implementation is dicey in retrospect.
Yeah, I've gone back and looked at some things. I'm like, I wrote that. Like, oh my god, that's bad. Like, oh, that's bad.
Yeah. Oh, what was I doing there? Me and all of my Perl code. I'm like, why did I mean, it's Perl, so you get away with it a little bit more. But like, that wasn't as good as I remember. But that make file was lit. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, what else from Kubecon? Like, I mean, this is me living vicariously through you since I didn't get to go this year. So what else did I miss from Kubecon?
Yeah. So this time what I did is I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna go try and be a sponge. And so I would walk around to like all the different booths, right? And if there's something I'd never heard of before, I would be like, what do you do? And also give me a t-shirt. And basically there's some really cool stuff out there. Like I can't remember, and now that I'm trying to remember the name of it, it's Ngrok is like this network.
Oh yeah, I know Ngrok.
Okay, so they're kind of like Scupper, but they do like another little thing where they have like they set up a URL that you can access. Anyways, I was like, damn, that sounds kind of cool. And then there's like runme.dev, which is like a web-based IDE. It's actually Markdown. You can write it in Markdown, then it'll convert it to some docs or create notebooks for you. Wiz is like a network security thing.
I know Wiz.
Man, they got it going on like that. I watched a demo. Like I actually watched a couple different demos and then a couple sessions of theirs. Like that is a awesome tool.
Wiz is interesting. So we've seen it in use quite a bit. And they do like kernel extensions or kernel add-ons, I guess. Kernel modules, that's the word I'm looking for. Kernel modules, right? So it actually interacts with the kernel. And if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've actually looked at their product website. They are, you could be like, it can be with VMs or with like Kubernetes and open, and thereby OpenShift, which I thought that's neat. That is the part for me on that.
Yeah, it was just from like a nerd watching, because like I said, I don't really care about GUIs most of the time.
Yeah.
But they specifically, when the guys were talking about how when they went in and they got a hold of the I think it was Argo CD. It was Argo CD inside of Azure GitOps, right? Like that whole setup. So once they got in and they were able to like laterally move around, they showed the network map of what it looked like, and I was like, oh my god, it's like the Matrix. It's like, it was so good.
I don't like a GUI either, but I love that stuff. Like, show me like the interactions, show me the sprawl. That stuff is pretty darn cool.
It was dope. It really was. And I mean, because like, and you see like they're like, oh, look, here's the one box that we had, and they scale out, and you're like, oh my god, because then you can see, once they were able to move laterally, you can see all the endpoints that they had access to, or that they that they knew of it anyways, that they were able to map out, which was pretty incredible. And then I talked to the Intuit team, the open source Argo team, and they're working on a feature that if you're familiar with like CI/CD and stuff like that. Like right now in Argo, there's really no promoting function. CodeFresh has not CodeFresh. Acuity has Cargo, right, which is kind of like that environment promoter. Intuit's working on one called the Argo CD promoter, which will basically give you an opportunity to have all of your manifests via environment in one repo, and then each environment would either be another environment on the same cluster or another cluster altogether. And then they have like a hydrator feature that they're also building to try and hydrate those manifests in those different clusters. That's still early dev and stuff like that. Like they had a little demo going, but I was like, man, that's a good idea, because now you're getting that capability within Argo to be able to like move between without having to have like a CI tool to do it. So it's like adding some sophistication to Argo to allow you to have multiple environments for your application deployments.
Yeah, and they've had a lot of good like precursor stuff to that with rollouts and what is the other word I'm looking for? My brain. I'm hitting that point now where it's like I hadn't had I did a bad. I didn't have breakfast. I had coffee and water, which is good. That's 2/3 of the way there. But I didn't eat, and it's almost lunchtime, and so my brain is like, hey, remember how you didn't feed me? Now I don't give you useful information.
Yeah, now it's nap time.
now you get nothing from me until you eat food. Yes. So I'm trying to remember. It's the way you do blue-green deployments in Argo, and we've talked about this on this stream like 3 times.
Oh, so rollouts. It's rollouts.
Is it? I thought, no, there was one other mechanism before rollouts. I don't remember.
You're not talking about workflows.
That might be what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That might be what I'm talking about. I don't remember. And I may be misremembering at this point because my brain is tired. But yeah, no. Anyway, the point is you've been getting a little bit of the precursor work to that, a little bit of that groundwork happening. Yeah. What about I know you said you spent a lot of time looking at networking stuff. What about like infrastructure as code stuff? So I think there's like 2 forks off of old Terraform from before they went they changed the licensing agreements to not be open source. One of them's Open Tofu, which I think they had some representation at Kubecon. I can't
they had a booth.
The other one.
Open Tofu, I don't remember who the other one is. But yeah, I mean, it's like Open Tofu was kind of in the front of the vendor pool. I don't remember the other one. Upbound was big. Upbound and the Crossplane, they had a big booth, and they were sitting right up there. Hashi was there, right, with all their stuff. There's a couple other ones that were like newer, but okay, that's cool. Tail scale, something like that. I think they were there. I can't remember. There's a few. I basically followed security. So there's one, I can't remember what it's called now, but they monitor all of your, like your Jiras, your GitHubs, your GitLabs, all that stuff, right? And they monitor for secrets and to make sure that you didn't spill anything. It's like Git Guardian is what it was.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and so like it'll go through and it'll just kind of it'll go out and check like, okay, hey, cool. Do you have are you spilling your AWS creds out in a repo, or do you have it in a Jira issue somewhere, like in a comment tucked away that you don't know about? You know what I mean? Just like weird things like that. It'll check down on the applications as well. And then another one that I saw that I thought was pretty cool was Cerberus, something like that. CERBOS. It does like automated RBAC. So like when it'll like, yeah, it's just think about it's just automated RBAC. I was like, oh damn, that's kind of cool. So, yeah, there was so much Hillary. I walked over and I literally talked to every vendor that I didn't know that I'd never heard of before. I'm like, all right, well, what do you do? Tell me about it. I'm not buying anything.
Yeah, I can buy 0 things.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here looking through my own book because there was something I had thought I had talked about for secrets and webhooks. Because you can do it on there's something that does it when you like it'll do a webhook on when you're doing a git commit and git push. It'll do a webhook locally and it will check to make sure you don't have any secrets.
I think we use like Git. Oh, I can't remember GitLog or something. Not GitLog, but
I know. God, I'm drawing a blank for all of these names. It's like I can tell you what the thing does, but don't ask me the name of it to save my life right now. But yeah, no, doing it. That's really cool. Looking at it for, especially because with Jira issues, the thing that is really important with that is, I was just having a conversation about this. Making sure that your logs are adequately scrubbed. A lot of people do a great job of this, and it's kind of an industry standard practice, right? You go through, you make sure that there's no secrets or anything in your logs or in your database. All of that stuff, secrets, passwords, other identifying information, like you just scrub it out, right? But it does still happen. It does still occur that you just, you're in early dev, so you forget to do that, or you haven't done it yet, or, whatever. Stuff just happens. You accidentally don't tell Git to ignore your environment file where you have like local credentials that you need to use, right? And so these things can end up being like kind of grabbed in and like thrown into all of the debugging information for an issue. And I think that's definitely like one of the biggest offenders is just like, okay, well, I got to go figure out what's wrong with this issue, or I need to pass this issue to somebody else, and I just grab everything and hand it to them. And I was like, well, going through that as a human is really difficult. So it's easy for those things to make mistakes there. But that is a huge it's a big problem for where data ends up where it ought not to be, or like how data ends up, production data ends up back in dev and test somehow. It's a lot of times sometimes just gets seeded in through what was provided as assets when debugging was being done.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
Is what it was. It was Git leaks. That's what we use on our team.
It's
just a quick cursory check to make sure that you don't have anything, and then, because we accidentally, I'm not going to drop any names, but the royal we dropped our AWS creds into repo once, and yeah, they got picked up right away, like immediately. So.
Yeah, we also have something we do have something scanning all of our Red Hat GitHub repos as well. I forget what it's called. We do a good job of that. But it does happen. It hasn't happened to me here, but I can't say I've never accidentally done it. Fortunately, all that stuff was closed source. So that made the cleanup a little bit easier, but yeah, it does happen. It happens.
What's fun is when you put your Red Hat pull secret on a live stream because you're not paying attention.
Oh,
which is fun.
That's fun. I have to repeat that. Man, I haven't done that. But it's man, yeah, that was actually when we did the external secrets operator and I set up that demo to show it with Christian forever ago. Actually didn't end up doing the integration into 1Password for the demo because I couldn't think of a good way to do it without accidentally showing off my personal 1Password. And I was like, I'm not doing this right now. Like,
Yeah.
not messing around with this stuff. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, not today.
Not today. Not today. We're not taking risks today.
ESO, by the way, is probably one of my favorite tools. Like that project is, oh my god, it's awesome.
I love it. I included it in the book.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good tool. It's just nice. Okay, well, we as per expectation managed to sit here and talk about nothing for an hour. Thank you for, like, this was very selfish of me. I just wanted to hear all about Kubecon because I didn't get to go this time. Which it was a good reason. I was home with my family for my kid's 10th birthday, which is kind of a milestone birthday.
Yeah, it's important.
My kid is obsessed with Rubik's Cubes, so we had our own Kubecon. I made that joke on LinkedIn because that was the only crowd that was going to get it.
Nice.
But we had a Rubik's Cube themed cake, and he got like 3 new Rubik's Cube puzzles for his birthday. Both of my kids are really interested in Rubik's Cubes right now, and they do like they're practicing. They want to actually, there's actually Rubik's Cube solving competitions. I don't know if you knew this.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know this. There's like a league at UC Berkeley that's open to pretty much anyone, and my kids are trying to get good enough to join the league, and they're like sub 40-second solving these Rubik's Cubes right now.
Wow.
And they're like, "Hey, mommy, do you want to learn?" And I'm like, no.
No.
My brain is tired. Thinking in 3D is the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, before we sign off, are there any closing thoughts that you have? KubeCon talks to look out for that people should watch the CNCF YouTube channel for showing up.
Yeah, so Valentina Sosa Rodriguez, I think, did a talk on OpenShift virtualization and Red Hat Developer Hub. It's kind of cool seeing the whole thing kind of coming together, like with some automation. If you're into like watching people crack products, then the one from Solo and the one from Wiz about, you know, like where they hit Argo and then they hit Istio sidecar, or I'm sorry, Istio and Linkerd service mesh. Those were both like very interesting. Like both Gerald and I were like, "Holy crap, this is awesome!" And then the backstage talk was more of like a product update and a demo. And I watched another one. I was trying to remember what it was. It was another networking one, but it just wasn't well done. The content was good, but the presenter was he was struggling. So yeah, that's probably one of those ones that you go back and just read the slides. But like once they start publishing, like I'll get all the links to them and stuff like that. But those were the big ones.
And I think the schedule was public on Sked, right? Shed. What do people call that app?
I don't know.
I don't know either. And then I know that the slides usually get updated to the event on Sked. I don't know how you say it. Oh, it's not letting me look for a past event. But if you happen to look at the event in the past, then I know that stuff gets updated with the slides get updated there, and I think they also later go back and also add in the link to the YouTube stream on things. And I think that's one thing the CNCF does really a good job on, is getting these talks recorded and then put back up. It's, you know, KubeCon it's a great event if you can go to it. The tickets are an expense. So it's definitely not necessarily always accessible in terms of just like budget for people. But the fact that we get these talks after the fact is such a nice thing, especially since even if you do go in person, like we said, sometimes all the talks you want to go to are at the exact same time.
Yeah. And honestly, like this year, it felt less. Last year was overwhelming, right? Trying to get around all the booths and then trying to get through the building, the convention center and stuff like that. Like it was pretty overwhelming trying to getting grounded out there. Where this time it really did feel like, okay, cool, I need to go to this second floor, you know, this room or whatever, and then you just go in and do your thing and listen and ask questions if you had questions and then bounce. It was I thought it was pretty well done.
Cool. Well, thank you for catching me up on all that I missed. we have schedule-wise, we have one more episode this year, right? On December 12th. I think we just.
Yep.
Yeah. So one more episode this year on December 12th, and we're not back until I think January 9th. And I think we decided we're doing cross-playing, which means that you and I actually have to sit down and like do a real presentation together, which we almost never do.
It's gonna be good.
It'll be great. So we'll see everybody back on December 12th for a episode on cross-playing. And then hopefully in the new year we can get something on software-defined networking. We'll take that as an action item. Okay. Choose your tech debt wisely. Bye. I'm gonna go eat food.